We're going to roll right into the last presentation of the day. That's the New Haven Pump Station Resiliency Project, one near and dear to my heart. Making this presentation will be both Chris Wester and Keven McKenna. Chris Wester is a Vice President and Regional Manager of Weston and Sampson in Rocky Hill Regional Office. Chris has 35 years of experience in engineering industry in Connecticut and is focused primarily on wastewater and water pumping and treatment marketplace. Chris is licensed in Connecticut and in Massachusetts and received his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from University of New Hampshire. Thanks for keeping the bio short, Chris. Keven McKenna is a Senior Project Engineer at Weston and Sampson, nearly 20 years of experience in utility design, site inspection, and construction administration. He has recently focused on pump station and treatment facilities process design, including production of site layout, grading, sedimentation, soil erosion control, utility plans, landscape, and lighting plans. He is proficient in the use of AutoCAD, Civil 3D, and Revit. Keven received his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from my alma mater, University of Hartford. So, welcome.
Hi, and good morning to everybody. It's great to be here, and I have to say that it's awesome to see everybody in 3D instead of on a screen. So, Keven and I are very happy to do this presentation. We'll keep it short. Not a whole lot of technical stuff here, but we're going to talk about the resiliency work that we've been helping Greater New Haven with over the past couple of years. Talk about the goals of their program, the projects and some of the systems that we've put in, and then we're going to tell you specifically about Fort Hale, which is the most recent station that's been fully upgraded. Interesting that most of the pump stations, as you would expect in New Haven, are down in the low-lying areas near the shoreline, all of course subject to flooding and inundation. And interesting that some of the stations need a couple of feet of raising to get them out of harm's way, and others are nearly 10 feet. You start looking at how you're going to raise a station 10 feet, how you're going to get the equipment 10 feet up out of the way. It's a hefty task, and we've seen some interesting things, and we'll tell you about them. Goals of the project, to protect the infrastructure, to dry and wet flood-proof some of the facilities. We've done some small stations, as many of you all have, and we're also working on some of New Haven's largest stations, and doing some interesting work to allow flooding into some portions, but protect the critical infrastructure within, and then to prohibit flooding from some of those structures as well, with the goal of keeping the equipment running, as well as allowing for staff to get to and out of the stations in a flood event so that they are safe. So the first work that we had done a couple of years ago was to help New Haven through the construction admin portion of raising 4 of the pump stations in East Haven, and basically all followed the same sort of approach to take the station, convert it to a submersible station, and then put a control and generator building up on stilts above the flood stage. Access could still be made into the station to run the facilities. Generators, control systems, electrical systems were kept up out of the wet, and the pumps, which obviously being submersible were made to be underwater, were left to operate as such. But it leaves you with some interesting looking buildings. As driving down the street and see this looks like a house shed up on stilts. But there's not a whole lot more you can do with that. Well, there is, and we'll show you a little bit later. So some of the things that were done, as you can see, I think Keven and the design team did a fantastic job of figuring out ways to, top left corner is basically the only remaining wall of the existing facility building that had all of the electrical and control equipment that was maintained. That was then enclosed throughout the construction. Construction then moved forward to install a series of deep piles some of them 20 to 30 feet deep to be able to support the station in its raised condition. Top right photo shows some of the poured piles after they had been poured. Bottom left shows the pile caps at grade with then the reinforced concrete columns to hold up the steel structure that holds up the building, which is shown in the bottom middle photo, and then getting close to encapsulating the outside of the building. The buildings were precast concrete, modular buildings brought on site, assembled on top of the platform, and then covered with some nicer looking architectural amenities to make them look nice as you can for the neighborhoods, I will say. Those were the first four that we helped, again, from construction admin side of things. And then moving into some of New Haven's larger stations, the East Street, the Boulevard, and the actual control building at the Water Pollution Control Facility. Pump stations, yes, they weren't pump station upgrades per se, but more flood control, flood mitigation measures on each of those stations. And the work that we had identified and done was to include some flood-proofing walls on the outside. The bottom left photo shows an air intake, a ventilation intake into the control building. Simple thing, raise the wall up to the flood elevation so that water can't just flood into the basement. Pretty obvious. The next photo on the bottom center there is a flood wall that was poured on the outside of the pumping station. I believe that's the Boulevard pump station. And that was quite interesting because in a flood condition where you have 5 or 6 feet of flood water going up onto a masonry wall, that wall was not made to withstand horizontal loading from a flood condition outside. So figuring out a way to get a reinforced concrete wall pasted onto the outside of the masonry wall so that it would stand up and withstand the floods. A very good design feat that Keven and the team took care of. Some of the other photos, again, showing some of the finished product. And this was some of the construction. As I had mentioned, one of the interesting aspects in the bottom right photo, you can see some reinforcing, some electrical conduits, and then a strip of silver. And that strip of silver was basically a stainless steel enclosure to house an outlet channel for the drains that are naturally put in behind a masonry wall. As walls, brickwork gets wet, the mortar seeps, water always gets behind that, and every masonry brick wall has drain channels at the bottom of them, and if we were to encase that drain channel in concrete, the wall would fail eventually because of the water behind it. So finding out some unique and interesting ways to take care of those situations. Again, the team in Greater New Haven worked on some very good details to figure that out. And in addition to the structural enhancements to the facilities, we also added some mechanical flood control devices, the removable leaves to place into channels that would allow the workers inside, to get into the building, to get out of the building to safety during flood events and things of that nature. So it's been interesting. Isabel and I were just talking about the delivery times for things like that over the last year have been challenging, to say the very least. But we're nearing having that all finalized, and it's been very, very successful. Now, the 8th station we haven't spoken about specifically yet, that's Fort Hale. And Fort Hale is pretty interesting because of its location, because of its historic nature, and the desire to make something look decent in a neighborhood that folks come to visit the facility. Fort Hale pump station itself sits right at the entrance to the Fort Hale Park. Fort Hale Park, very historic in nature from the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. Actually saw some action there during the Revolutionary War in 1779 when the British sent a bunch of ships to New Haven Harbor and to Norwalk and to other areas. A group of 19 heroic soldiers defended the fort, defended the harbor, as long as they could until they ran out of ammo, shooting from the Fort Hale facilities. And when they ran out of ammo, the British were able to overrun and make it into New Haven to do what they were going to do, but the great people of New Haven, as they still do today, hosted them, shared their rum, got them drunk enough that they forgot what they were doing, and they all went back to their ships to sleep off their hangover, and damaged a little bit, pillaged a little bit, but it was nowhere near as bad as it could have been. So Fort Hale played a fantastic role in that. Today, Fort Hale is surrounded by some very, very important facilities, the U.S. Coast Guard Station, the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve Center on the north and on the south of the facility, and what you see in the center there, the star, is where our pump station at Fort Hale is. Kevin's going to talk to wrap things up about some of the detail and show you how the station turned out, and I will admit at this point in time that we had to actually use an architect to help us do this because our engineering expertise and our creativity for making things look nice is sometimes limited. That's just the nature of what engineers do. So Kevin, why don't you take it and run with some more of the technicals.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Keven McKenna. I'd like to walk through a brief description of the design and construction of the Fort Hale pump station. The existing pump station was built in 1946. The 14 by 11 foot concrete structure originally housed two ejector pumps in the lower level. In 1967, the station was reconfigured with submersible pumps installed, and the wet well and valve chamber were constructed in the lower level. Electrical and control panels were located on the ground floor in explosion-proof cabinets. Greater New Haven asked us to help upgrade the station with the following goals in mind: provide protection from possible flood damage, install a permanent standby generator, moving here, upgrade the electrical service, and limit confined space entry. The building aesthetics was a concern as the station is located in a residential area and near the entrance to the Fort Hale Park. The original thought was to install a new control building on piers similar to previous East Haven pump stations, but due to the tight site and the number of buried utilities in the area, the option to keep the existing structure and place a new structure on top of the existing was reviewed. This approach would remove the requirements for costly piles and limit the size of the station footprint to allow for some aesthetic improvements. This rendering and section show here were developed to meet these outline goals. In order to house the required electrical and control panels along the generator, the building was slightly larger than the existing building. Also, the requested 72-hour generator fuel tank pushed the ceiling height up, which gave the building a look similar to the fort. As it is located next to the entrance of the Fort Hale Park, the decision was to incorporate this into the architectural design. In order to facilitate construction, we installed some new gravity sewer piping and manholes to direct flow to a single manhole in front of the station, which would act as the bypass pump suction point. The existing force main was located, and above-ground bypass connection was installed. With isolation valves, a primary electrical pump and backup diesel bypass pumps were installed, and the station was able to be shut down and allow for demolition of the existing and installation of the new station upgrades. The valve vault was also moved outside the building to the north to allow for easier maintenance access. Here are some photos of the station during construction. You can see top left, that was the existing wet well, which was gutted, pipes and pumps removed. The concrete was inspected for cracks or spalling. The minor issues we found were repaired, and the entire wet well was lined with reinforced epoxy. New pumps and force main piping were installed from the wet well to the new valve vault chamber. You can see in the bottom left. The lower level was prepped for the installation of 4 8 by 8 half-inch columns to support the overhead control building. And then the building was stick-built on site with metal studs, plywood sheeting, and hardy board. This is some pictures of the nearly complete upper and lower level of the control building. On the left, you can see the control panels. Middle is new generator, an ATS, and electrical panels. The lower level was designed to be able to be flooded in a flood event. All equipment is above the design flood elevation. You have access to pumps and a crane to pick. We also installed Meltrick connectors to ease disconnect and reconnection of the pumps. Here you can see some of the finished product. We got a front view and a view in the back showing access to the station, fuel fill lines. And this is the final product. We met the goals of protecting all sensitive equipment, adding a standby generator and bypass connection, and we have a beautiful, resilient wastewater treatment pump station. Thank you.
All right, I got something really cool here. They've been working on this station up to the last week. So taking photos and things was difficult because all the work that was going on. So these guys couldn't get any opportunity to take photos. So fortunately, the G&H has the luxury of having one of its employees do this as a hobby and asked him to do a drone flight. But since this particular pump station is near Tweed, New Haven Airport, as soon as they got the drone up in the air, it immediately landed itself, apparently. So he said, I'll put something else together, and he sent it to me in a Dropbox folder. So these guys haven't even seen this yet. And actually, this is the first time I'm seeing some of the pictures in this because it's, like I said, everything's come together almost like an open house on one of those TV shows. So. I show that to my wife and like, look at how cool this is. She's like, you're crazy. All right. Closing announcements. Thanks. Do we finish on time to all the online people? We did. 4 minutes to spare. I apologize for the glitches. This is the first time doing this. Again, thanks to Craig and Lydia. They did a tremendous job. They had to come here a few days ago and try to test this out and Janice Moran up at Nuea's headquarters. She's running the registration. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. You know, this is not something that I ever anticipated getting involved in, to be honest, to this extent. But the demand was there to try to do a little of both. And, you know, now there's an opportunity. Maybe this is something that we could do normally. It provides for more, the word to get out to other people, maybe that, you know, can't get out to the event, but they can sit at their desk and at least tune into some of it. Hopefully it was informative. I'm really encouraged that we had some speakers that were speaking for the first time. A lot of times they don't have opportunities to do this at the bigger events of Nuea, so, you know, youth, that's what our future is here. So it's great that we had these presentations. Again, with the golf tournament, anything you guys can do, some of the sponsors have been hugely supportive here. Weston, Sampson, Savy and Son, those guys are over there. They're fun to talk to. Even if you're not going to have any sewer lining work, you can talk to those guys. They'll cheer you up, I promise you. Green Mountain, Ray Barr has been a steadfast in the wastewater community for years. He's always supportive. He's running this golf tournament, so anything you can do to help him. I really appreciate everyone coming. 75 people in attendance after COVID. I think it's a good run. And hope you all come back for the next one. Like I said, the next event's going to be a big deal. So hope to see you in September.